I'm going to begin this morning with a kind of mashup reading from Genesis 11, 12, 13, and 15. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and brought them out of Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they reached Haran, they settled there. The lifetime of Terah was 205 years. Then Terah died in Haran. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your land, your relatives, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth will find blessing in you." Abram went as the Lord directed him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions that they had accumulated, and the persons they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the sacred place of Shechem by the oak of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So Abram built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel, pitching his tent, with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. He built an altar there to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. Then Abram journeyed on by stages to the Negev. After Lot had parted from him, the Lord said to Abram, "Look about you, and from where you are, gaze to the north and south, east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants like the dust of the earth. If anyone could count the dust of the earth, your descendants too might be counted. Get up and walk through the land, across its length and breadth, for I give it to you." Abram moved his tents and went on to settle near the oak of Mamre, which is at Hebron. Sometime afterward, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not fear, Abram. I am your shield. I will make your reward very great." But Abram said, "Lord God, what can you give me if I die childless and have only a servant of my household, Eliezer of Damascus?" Abram continued, "Look, you have given me no offspring, so a servant of my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him. "No, that one will not be your heir. Your own offspring will be your heir." He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars if you can. Just so," he added, "will your descendants be." Abram put his faith in the Lord, who attributed it to him as an act of righteousness. Early this past week, I heard a song by Peter Mulvey that I hadn't heard before, and the bridge had just the right combination of words and melody that it has been in my head all week long. I've been waking up each morning with these words in my head and going to bed with them also, and I could even add, I've been preaching them with them in my head. And the particular words are, "Beware, O traveler, the road is walking to." Beware, O traveler, the road is walking to. The overall song is a song about the inexplicable presence of joy in really sad and desperate times. The first verse begins, "In the long year of the knife, when everything was open to the startled pale of bone and to the quickened bloom of pain, we wept and bled and trembled in the doorway to the station." And so in that context, or maybe any context, one wonders, what does it mean to say that the road is walking to? While we are on a journey on the road is also on a journey. But what does that mean, really? Well, let's say that you are traveling across the country by plane and you have to change flights in one of those huge hub airports like Atlanta or Denver. And you have 45 minutes between flights, which is enough time to get from concourse A to concourse E if everything goes well. And it's going to be a tight squeeze if your first flight is late at all. And naturally, travel being what it is these days, your first flight is 10 minutes late. And concourse E is 1.5 miles away. And it is 6:45 in the morning. And so you now have two goals for your life, two passionate desires. Find a cup of coffee and get to concourse E on time. And you know that you are not able to run for 1.5 miles if you ever were, but especially towing your little wheeled carry-on with one hand and carrying your laptop with the other. So you decide you're going to take the moving sidewalk. And you get on the sidewalk and you're carried along for 1/4 mile or so, and then it ends and you walk for about 20 yards, and then you step onto the next segment of the moving sidewalk, on and on and on, and you move along the last segment. It's 10 minutes to the departure of your plane. You can finally see the end of the sidewalk at concourse E, far, far off in the distance, and just then, just then, you see yourself moving past Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever coffee place they have there in Atlanta, and it is too far for you to run backwards, and it's too far for you to run ahead and then go back and then run again. And that's when you know you are not going to get that cup of coffee, no matter how badly you need it. And you had your plan, but the road is walking too, and it has carried you away from your plan. And whatever you do next is going to be an alternative to your original plan, and adaptation, because the road is walking too. And really, that's what most of our lives are like. We have dreams and goals, things we want to accomplish. Become a veterinarian, get married and have 2 kids, publish a book, win best raspberry jam at the state fair, become an airline pilot, rebuild a Model T, play professional basketball. You each know what your dreams and goals have been. And things get in the way. You want to get married and have 2 kids, but you're a college professor in a small town in the rural West, which doesn't have much of a supply of people who share your interest in biblical Hebrew, and you never get married. You want to become a veterinarian, but 2 things happen. You cannot manage to pass organic chemistry, and you realize on your own that when it comes to it, you really don't have a lot of patience when a Holstein steps on your foot and then swings her head into your face. You're fantastic at basketball, but you never grow taller than 5'6". That's life. The best laid plans of mice and men go oft astray. And this is how it is that the story of Abraham can be so instructive. I have condensed into about 1 page, what takes up between 8 to 10 chapters of Genesis. But basically, I'm going to assume that you know the basic outlines of the story. I'm going to reiterate them, but I'm hoping that you'll fill out the details. Basically, God makes Abraham this outlandish promise, and then life seems to offer Abraham everything but the fulfillment of that promise. First of all, he sets out with his father for the land of Canaan, and for whatever reason, the Bible never tells us, they settle in Haran instead. Then his father dies, and Abraham takes his whole family and goes to Canaan as God asks him to do. And then within a very short time, there is a famine, and they go to Egypt. And not only that, but Abraham decides that his wife, Sarah, is extremely beautiful and that all the men will want her. And in order to get her, they will kill him. So he says to Sarah, tell everybody that you're my sister. And she does, and she gets taken into the household of another man. And then God starts threatening the other man, and he goes to Abraham and says, why didn't you tell me that she was your wife and not your sister? And then eventually Sarah comes back to Abraham's household. He's laden down with gifts of gold and camels, and he eventually returns to Canaan rich, just as his nephew Lot returns to Canaan rich. And they are so rich and have so many herds and flocks that they have to separate. And Lot takes the richer land on the plain of Jordan near Sodom, and Abraham takes the hill country near Hebron. So things are going along okay, and then Lot is captured in a war against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abram has to go out with his private army and rescue Lot, and then he returns to Hebron again. So he's pretty old by this time, still has no children. And finally, after 10 years or so, Sarah says, we don't have any kids. Why don't you take my servant Hagar to bed with you, have a son with her, and that will be your heir. And so that's what happens. Abraham has a son, Ishmael. Things go south between Sarah and Hagar. And Hagar complains to God. God goes and talks to Abraham. Abraham says, what about Ishmael? God says, he's not the son that I meant. He says, within a year, you and Sarah will have a son. And I'm making this covenant with you. And the sign of the covenant will be that you and your entire household will be circumcised. So at the age of 75, Abraham is circumcised. I don't like to think about that degree of pain, but there you have it. I would think of that as a bump along the road, if you ask me. But after the circumcision, God comes by again, this time in the form of three angels or three men, and says, Sarah's really going to have a child. And it's at this time that God intercedes, that Abraham intercedes on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah and asks God whether he's really going to destroy them, and has that conversation with God. And of course, Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, which means bad things for his nephew Lot. Eventually, Isaac is born. Abraham, because he's part farmer and part herdsman, travels around some more. Once again, even with his son Isaac now part of his household, he passes off Sarah as his sister and not his wife, gets another kingdom in trouble, gets Sarah back again. And then finally, after all of this has gone on, God says to Abraham, okay, so now I want you to kill Isaac. And Abraham somehow says, okay. He proves that he's willing to do it. God rescues Isaac. This is a whole nother sermon in itself. But after that episode, God promises him again that as a reward for his faithfulness, his descendants will be as numberless as the stars and the sand combined. I just noticed this weekend that the first time he promises this, he promises Abraham that his descendants will be as numberless as the earth. The second time he makes the promise, he says his descendants will be as numberless as the stars. And the final time he makes the promise, he says his descendants will be as numberless as the stars and the earth. And then from then on, Genesis is more concerned with the story of Isaac. But here is a guy who has been promised a future by God, and the road keeps taking him everywhere but to the fulfillment of that promise. Although Genesis makes it really, really clear that God really loves Abraham. And the way the Jewish religion considers Abraham is as the epitome of faithfulness, and that Abraham deserves to have his descendants be numberless because he is the extreme example of faithfulness. This is a theme that recurs in the New Testament when Paul often uses Abraham as the example of faithfulness. So to go back to Genesis 15, when God promises him that his descendants will be as numberless as the stars, that passage ends, Abraham put his faith in the Lord, who attributed it to him as an act of righteousness, which means the law did not exist yet, but Abraham is considered to have obeyed the law because his trust in the Lord was that great. It leads me to believe that the questions that we often ask ourselves are the wrong questions. We ask ourselves, what am I going to do? When the better question is, who am I going to be? What is faithfulness for me? Rather than what is success? I think the answers to those questions exist at a deeper level that our dreams lie on top of. The deeper level of trust, compassion, kindness. What are the attributes in ourselves that God is working through? Maybe not patience, but maybe an ability to listen. Maybe not necessarily a vision for the future, an ability to think strategically, but maybe an ability to tell the truth, an ability to see the truth, maybe the ability to be watchful. Maybe we have a gift of empathy. Those are the things that we can be no matter where the moving road takes us. I was thinking about this in conjunction with our retreat yesterday, because that question about who are we going to be rather than what are we going to do, or that being the order of the questions, came up in the retreat. I'm not sure that we ask ourselves often enough, who do we want to be when the road is taking us where we don't want to go? Who do we want to be when the road is taking us where we do want to go? I think it's a question that never gets old or becomes irrelevant. Who am I going to be when I trust God?